The Boston Celtics find themselves in the middle of a surprising story involving none other than Ben Simmons. Yes, that Ben Simmons. The former All-Star who, not too long ago, was seen as one of the most promising two-way players in the league. Now, just a few years later, he's reportedly contemplating retirement. And that changes everything, especially for teams like the Celtics who were once rumored to be frontrunners for his services. Let's rewind for a moment. The Celtics, fresh off a strong season and continuing to look for that extra push to dominate the East, have an open roster spot and were reportedly interested in Simmons as a low-risk addition. The idea wasn't completely outrageous. On paper, Simmons could bring elite defense and playmaking, potentially fitting in as a versatile piece off the bench. With Boston's strong perimeter shooting and established stars like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, a guy like Simmons wouldn't be asked to carry a heavy scoring load, something that's been a point of contention in his career for a while now. But that all might be off the table. In the last 24 hours, things have escalated fast. First, we started hearing whispers that Simmons was thinking about stepping away from the game altogether. That alone was enough to raise eyebrows. But then came the news that his agent had formally stepped down and removed him from the NBPA's registry. That's not just some behind-the-scenes shake-up. That's a major signal that Simmons might be walking away from the league. When your own agent decides to cut ties, especially at a moment when you're already under pressure, it paints a picture that things might be worse than they appear on the surface. This is not just a player who's struggling with form. This is a player whose entire NBA future is in question. After bouncing from Philadelphia to Brooklyn and briefly being associated with other teams like the Clippers, Simmons has never really looked like his old self. The injuries, the questions around his mental readiness, and the complete drop in confidence, it's been a steady decline. And now, we're at a point where the discussion isn't about what team he might help, but whether he even wants to play basketball anymore. From Boston's point of view, this changes a lot. On one hand, it could be seen as a blessing in disguise. The Celtics are in a win-now mode, and bringing in someone like Simmons, who might not be physically or mentally ready to contribute, could be a distraction or a gamble with very little upside. On the other hand, if there's still something left in the tank, and if Simmons were willing to accept a smaller role, perhaps on a minimum contract, there's at least a conversation to be had. But that's all speculative now, especially given that Simmons might be done with the league entirely. There were reports not too long ago suggesting that Simmons had drawn interest from multiple teams, with the Celtics and Knicks being the two most talked about. The Knicks have their own needs at the guard position, but Boston, with its depth and current construction, would only be looking at Simmons as a complementary piece, not a centerpiece. Even so, adding someone with his defensive chops and court vision could have made things interesting, especially in second-unit rotations. He can guard positions 1 through 5, initiate fast breaks, and create open look for shooters. That's valuable in today's NBA, no question. But again, the issues go far deeper than XS and OS. When you hear someone is considering retirement, especially a player as young as Simmons, it makes you wonder what's really going on behind the scenes. This is a guy who once had the basketball world at his feet, being compared to LeBron James in terms of raw ability and court IQ. He signed a max contract, made all-defensive teams, was a multi-time All-Star, and yet now, at just 29 years old, his name is more associated with missed opportunities than game-winning plays. There's been ongoing talk about mental health struggles, lingering injuries, and maybe even burnout. And while fans can be quick to judge, the human side of the game is very real. From a competitive standpoint, the Celtics might not need Simmons. They already have one of the deepest and most balanced rosters in the league. They've got size, defense, shooting, leadership, and experience. But having that 15th roster spot open gives them flexibility. If someone like Simmons was fully committed and healthy, it could have been an intriguing experiment, especially for a team that thrives on positional versatility and defensive intensity. But all signs right now point to Simmons being far from ready, mentally or physically, to contribute at that level. Brian Windhorst recently chimed in on the situation, noting that Simmons may have to settle for a non-guaranteed minimum deal if he does want to stay in the league. That's a massive fall from grace for someone who was once the centerpiece of a franchise. Just think about it. A player who used to command max dollars might now have to fight for a spot on the end of a bench. And based on his current mindset, that might not be something he's willing to do. Retirement, as shocking as it sounds, might actually make more sense from his perspective. All of this raises the big question. What should the Celtics do? Should they hold that roster spot open in hopes that someone better becomes available mid-season? Should they take a flyer on Simmons if he changes his mind and wants to play? The front office will have to weigh the potential upside against the risk of bringing in a player whose commitment and physical readiness are both in question. And then there's the cap situation. Boston is walking a tightrope financially, and signing Simmons, even to a cheap deal, could impact their tax situation. Brad Stevens has made it clear that the team won't make panic moves just to fill out the roster. Every decision has to be calculated, and adding someone like Simmons, with so many unknowns, just doesn't seem like a move this team is willing to make right now. But that doesn't mean the story is over. The NBA season is long, and teams often find themselves needing help as injuries pile up and rotations get tested. There's a world where Simmons stays in shape, gets his mind right, and makes a comeback later in the season. Maybe a team loses a key defender or playmaker and needs someone who can step in and contribute. If that moment comes, and if Simmons is available, Boston might revisit the conversation. Until then, though, it feels like this chapter might be closing before it ever really began. So while Celtics fans were once excited at the idea of a low-risk, high-reward signing in Ben Simmons, the reality now is far more complicated. The player that once held so much promise is now at a crossroads, and Boston may be better off focusing on players who are fully locked in and ready to contribute to a championship run. There's a certain sadness to the Ben Simmons situation that goes beyond basketball. You look at how the NBA has evolved over the past decade. Fast pace, floor spacing, multi-positional defenders, switch-heavy schemes, and you realize that a fully engaged and healthy Ben Simmons should have been built for this era. A 6'10" ball handler who can push the break, guard every position, and create shots for others? That's the dream mold for a modern playmaker. But dreams don't always pan out the way we expect. And now we're looking at a player who, despite his physical gifts and early success, is potentially stepping away from the game before 30. Not because he aged out, not because he can't find a team, but maybe because mentally and emotionally the tank is empty. When the Celtics were first linked to Simmons, the immediate reaction among fans was mixed. Some saw it as a smart gamble, a low-cost way to add a veteran with upside. Others felt it would disrupt the culture that's been carefully built over the last few years, especially with the emergence of leaders like Jason Tatum and Jrue Holiday, who bring a level of focus and professionalism that Boston prides itself on. But now, with everything unfolding the way it has, it feels like the organization may have dodged a bullet. Not because Simmons is a bad player, but because he's clearly not in a place where he can be the kind of contributor a title-contending team needs. And the Celtics, more than any team right now, are locked into a win-now window. They don't have time to be someone's rehab stop. That said, it's worth noting that the door hasn't been slammed shut. There's still an outside chance that Simmons finds clarity, regains his love for the game, and makes a return. And if that happens, someone will give him a shot. The league is full of second chances, and there's always a GM out there willing to take a swing on a once-elite talent, especially when the cost is low. But the idea that the Celtics would be that team feels increasingly unlikely. Boston doesn't need to fix anyone right now. What they need is stability, focus, and every ounce of energy aimed toward Banner 18. In fact, keeping that final roster spot open might be one of the smartest things Brad Stevens can do. The league landscape changes quickly. Injuries, buyouts, unexpected trades, all of that creates opportunities. And holding on to flexibility could allow the Celtics to pounce on a situation later in the season that actually makes a difference. Whether that's a defensive wing, a stretch big, or a locker room veteran, they'll have options. Burning that spot on Simmons, given the uncertainty and the baggage he brings, just doesn't make strategic sense anymore. Think back to how Simmons' fall started. The infamous playoff series against Atlanta, passing up a wide-open dunk, the fallout with the Sixers organization, and the long layoff that followed. Since then, it's been a story of setbacks, both physical and mental. His stint with the Nets never got off the ground, and even when he was on the court, it felt like he was just a shell of himself. No aggression, no confidence, no impact. It wasn't just that he wasn't scoring. It was that he wasn't competing in the way fans remembered. And that lack of competitiveness is what scared off a lot of front offices. Now, with the reports of his agent stepping away, it signals that even those closest to him might not see a clear path forward. That's not normal. Agents don't walk away from players unless they feel like the relationship has run its course or that the player is no longer going to generate opportunities. Combine that with the retirement talks, and you get the sense that Simmons isn't just taking time off. He might really be done. It's also important to consider the financial angle. Simmons has made a fortune already. Over $100 million in career earnings, endorsement deals, and more. He's not playing for his next contract. If he steps away, he's not walking away broke. He's walking away with financial freedom, something most players don't have the luxury to do without hesitation. That alone makes his situation unique. For a guy who's already secured the bag, the motivation to grind through another rehab, another training camp, another fight to prove himself, it just might not be there anymore. Meanwhile, Boston is moving full speed ahead. They've got a strong roster, chemistry, a well-defined identity, and expectations of reaching the finals. The focus is sharp. The hunger is real. Adding someone like Simmons, who brings more questions than answers, feels like an unnecessary gamble at this point, especially when there are other names floating around the league who might become available, players with less drama, less history, and more recent production. Even someone like Russell Westbrook, who's also had a tough offseason, might be more appealing in terms of mindset and effort. Say what you want about Westbrook's game, but the guy plays hard. Always has. Simmons, on the other hand, seems mentally checked out, and in a locker room that's built on accountability and grit, that kind of energy won't fly. The Celtics don't need a project. They need contributors. There's also the matter of fit. Boston's offense is built around spacing and ball movement. They rely heavily on shooters, floor balance, and players who can attack closeouts or finish in transition. Simmons doesn't shoot. Never has. And while he's a brilliant passer, the Celtics already have capable playmakers in Derek White, Drew Holiday, and even Peyton Pritchard. The need for a pass-first non-shooter just isn't there. Defensively, yes, Simmons brings something special. But so does Holiday. So does Tatum. So does Horford. The Celtics aren't lacking on that end. What they're lacking, if anything, is a spark plug who can bring energy without disrupting the rhythm of the team. And Simmons is too unpredictable for that role. All of this points to a broader reality. The NBA doesn't wait for anyone. Careers rise and fall at a brutal pace. And even the most talented players can find themselves on the outside, looking in if they're not able or willing to adapt. Simmons had the world at his feet. He was supposed to be the next great two-way star. And now, in the span of a few years, he's a question mark, a cautionary tale about talent, pressure, and the psychological toll this game can take. For now, though, the Celtics are focused. Training camp is approaching, the goals are clear, and the organization is operating with championship vision. The Simmons story might have been a distraction if it had progressed, but now, it feels like Boston can move on without looking back. They've got bigger things ahead, and their eyes are firmly on the prize. But before we continue, please remember to subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest news about the Boston Celtics. Feel free to share your thoughts on the news in the comments as well. In a move that has left the basketball world reeling, whispers from inside the NBA corridor suggest that Nikola Jokic, the Serbian superstar and cornerstone of the Denver Nuggets, is ready to turn his back on the team that drafted him and shocked fans across the league by reportedly agreeing to terms with the Boston Celtics. Sources close to the player hint at a decision fueled not just by ambition, but by a desire to chase a different kind of legacy, one that may see Jokic trading the Rocky Mountains for the historic parquet floors of Boston. The reaction in Denver has been nothing short of explosive. Fans who have long celebrated the Jokic-led era are reportedly feeling betrayed, with social media erupting in disbelief and heated debates about loyalty, money, and the modern nature of player movement. "It's unthinkable," one anonymous Denver insider reportedly said. "Jokic has been our face for years, and suddenly it feels like the rug's been pulled out from under us." Rumors suggest that Celtics management has been quietly courting Jokic for months, leveraging the team's championship pedigree and the promise of a new challenge that could finally cement his name among the legends of the sport. Meanwhile, in Boston, speculation is mounting about how Jokic could fit alongside established stars and a roster hungry for a title. The Celtics, known for their strategic trades and savvy acquisitions, seem poised to pull off what could be the blockbuster signing of the decade. If true, this move would not only shake up the Eastern Conference, but also send shockwaves through the Nuggets locker room, potentially triggering a chain reaction of trades and signings as Denver scrambles to rebuild around a suddenly vacant superstar spot. While nothing is official yet, the NBA rumor mill is buzzing like never before, with analysts and fans alike questioning the motives behind such a seismic shift. Is it all about championships, money, or a personal quest for something bigger? One thing is certain. If Nikola Jokic really does swap Denver for Boston, the basketball landscape will never look the same, and the whispers of betrayal will echo in arenas from coast to coast for years to come. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Boston Celtics, please subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. We always appreciate your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.